say, oh, vet care is expensive. I do agree it's high compared to human healthcare, but it's because human healthcare has all these in place that veterinary care does not. People do forget that human healthcare is subsidized.
So there was a recent news about pet parents spending over 60K in vet bills. And we also understand that you have some thoughts on this. Maybe you could share with us a bit more on this.
Yeah, I think that, from time to time we do see these articles about vet fees and how it's high and increasing do come up from time to time. Most recent one is the article that you mentioned about this pet owner who had to sell his home, if I recall correctly, to pay his vet bills. He had a couple of French bulldogs, and they had some prostate issues. It was not sterilized, and I think he did use some holistic treatment instead of an evidence-based treatment. So in terms of vet fees as a whole, I think the vet profession is not immune to the larger economic situation and environment. Even the human costs, if you look at recent articles with increasing prices in the human side, the MOH spending more on human healthcare, all these things apply to the vet industry as well. The only thing is that we are mostly SMEs. So we are even more, we don't have that kind of economies of scale and bargaining power as a human health side, which makes it worse. I would agree. I think a lot of people, it's important also when we mention that vet fees are high. Like my next question is always what high relative to what? I mean, when we say prices are high, like it has to be relative to something, right?
Yeah.
And usually there will be a few responses. Relatively high in terms of my salary, right? People's salary. So that's one. But I think what's more common is people feel it's high compared to human healthcare. What they actually pay for their own health. That's the best comparison that they have on a day-to-day basis. So I go to say a polyclinic, for example. I think sometimes you don't even need to pay much, maybe $10, $20 for medicine. Consult is highly subsidized, right? But if you go for a GP appointment in the vet clinic, you expect maybe even a couple of hundred. It's very normal. So there's this huge difference that people compare with, right? A few hundred for their pet, and then for themselves, it's only $20, $30, for example. So there's this comparison being drawn now. Then people say vet fees are high. I think a lot of people do forget that human healthcare is subsidized. We're very lucky in Singapore to have really good and affordable human healthcare. We have MediSave, right? So the upfront cash that we pay for our own care, healthcare, is quite low. You can, for most part, tap on your MediSave, right? That already has been earmarked for human healthcare, for your own health. So cash-wise, you don't actually need to come out that much. But we don't have that in pet care. So that's one. And then also a lot of us have medical insurance, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's forced or additional ones that you buy, you are covered some. So I think pretty much every Singaporean or resident is covered by some sort of insurance. But we don't have that in pet care as well. So what this means is that there's comparatively a lot of cash. When you go, the cash up front is higher. Yeah, so that makes people say, oh, vet care is expensive. I do agree it's high compared to human healthcare, but it's because human healthcare has all these in place that veterinary care does not. Yeah, so that's something that I always mention. I think in addition to that, it's also something we touched on earlier. A big part of running a vet clinic, a huge cost is manpower. Makes up about 35 to 40% of entire operating expense in a typical clinic, sometimes more. And like we said, because we don't have a vet school, a lot of vets actually don't work full time anymore, work fewer hours, migrate out of Singapore. Also, all these things causes this manpower crunch that we're facing now for vets and for vet nurses. And for vet clinics to have the manpower is to staff their team. you need to offer an attractive salary. So that's one way to do it. Or cut down the hours of your vet team to make it more attractive. And what that means is that this exacerbates the cost. The cost of the manpower goes up. People are working fewer hours, and all this causes the cost needs to be passed on as a small business, needs to be passed on to some extent to the pet owner. So there has been a few price revisions, I know, by a few clinics recently, and it's because of all these factors. Yeah, the manpower cost has gone up quite a bit since COVID, especially. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure, because I also see articles that, people saying that fees is quite expensive. Is there any way SVA will get involved, like investigation or going on to investigate, whether the clinic will overcharge, something like this?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have investigative powers, but AVS can do that under the license lah.
Okay.
Although for the most part, because I used to do disciplinary cases when I was in as a regulator, and price is something that at least back then we never looked at, because the principle is that it's a free market, okay, and that there are various reasons why prices might fluctuate between clinics, right? Cost variables, cost factors can be very different. For Canopy, we're located in Jurong, where the rent is a bit cheaper, so we can afford everything to be a bit cheaper. But there are many clinics that are located in prime areas. The service is also very different. You can be very no frills, and then there's a great customer experience. So it's hard to decide like what is too high, what is too low. But what is quite clear that is that, number one, as part of the vet center licensing conditions, there's this basic sets of services that has to be put up on the signboard in the clinic. So your basic services, the prices must be put up transparently. So that's one. There's also a second point, which is that any service provided, you need to provide a quote to the owner, and if you're not allowed to exceed that quote. So that's very clear in the regulations right now, the code of ethics and also licensing, which is part of the licensing conditions. Yeah, so these are safeguards to protect the pet owner. Yeah. I'll also add a point to that, which is, and this is something I always tell pet owners and even our clients at Canopy as well, is always seek a second opinion or get a second quote if you would. I mean, we have 110 clinics now in Singapore, even more now. It's very normal practice to get a second quote and a second opinion. Yeah, don't feel like you have to stick to the same vet clinic. I know you may have gone to that clinic for their whole life, but it's same as our own health, right? Sometimes we go to one specialist, it's very normal in the medical profession. You seek a second opinion from another specialist for a certain medical condition and a second quote as well. And then you get a few quotes and then see whether it's reasonable. I mean, most vet clinics are still own independent practices. They don't have any price collusion or anything like that. So you can ask for a few quotes and then see whether that works for you. Yeah.
Because I remember seeing an article also saying that, or maybe it was a written comment or feedback along the lines of like, I went to the vet and then after that the bill was exorbitant kind of thing. So I think that pet parents also should before, let's say, the pet goes for a procedure and all that, if they're not told the quote, they should actually also ask for it, right? Okay, so can you list down what's the price? Of course, certain things may happen. So from what I understand, the vet clinic that I go to, they will definitely list and tell you what, how much is everything. But for example, if dental, we need to do a teeth extraction. So how much per tooth kind of thing. So it ranges from here to here kind of thing. Yeah, so I think then that would reduce a lot of misunderstanding. Yeah, rather than if you don't know anything and then just go ahead and it may be quite a shock to some people. Yeah, so if you don't see the prices or you're not told the prices, then I think you just ask. That would be the safest thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same as procuring any service or product, right? Whether it's a restaurant or online or anything, you must know the price first. And if you don't, it's our duty in the vet clinic to let you know. So I absolutely agree.
So that means that pet parents don't feel shy, ask for the price before you step in.
Yes.
You step in first, then ask the price. You ask at the door.
Or you can call to ask it. You can call to ask.
Yeah. What I worry is, like some pet parents, I think they are too like they love their pet so much, even though they can't afford, they still try their best, like want to heal the pets. And I think that is where, the bills start to go up, which they can't afford to pay, and in the end.
Yeah.
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 Good.
Which I think even more up, because since we're talking on prices now, the other thing is the education to pet parents before purchasing a pet. A lot of times when pet parents, they purchase a pet, they only think about the upfront costs. They don't think about anything else after that. But they don't realize that there is medical bills, grooming, food and everything that comes with it. And medical bills can get very, very expensive. So I think they also need to have the understanding of that financial commitment that they are also committing to with that pet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, which is again back to the point about preventive care. I mean, it may cost there may be some costs associated with preventive care, of course, but really it also prevents a larger expense further down the line. Say if you go for regular scaling and polishing, right, then you don't need to do a lot of extractions in the future, for example. Or if you spay and sterilize your animals when they're young, they recover earlier. But also it virtually eliminates a lot of the other disease risk as well of some diseases, and which can cost a lot when it happens. Yeah, so all this preventive care is really important as well. I'll also add that actually these days there's a lot of service providers at vet clinics that offer like an installment plan or installment service. So you can also give the clinic a call to ask if they do allow that now. Yeah, so if our own clinic does, you can split over 3 months payment, and that helps a lot. Some families a lot. Yeah.
How about pet insurance?
This podcast is proudly sponsored by Hill's Prescription Diet. Does your pet experience food sensitivities and fat sensitivities? ZD Low Fat is specially formulated with hydrolyzed soy protein and low fat levels to help avoid adverse food reactions and promote healthy skin in dogs with food and fat sensitivities. The Active Biome Plus ingredient technology is clinically shown to rapidly activate the gut microbiome to support digestive health and well-being. Enjoy the benefits of healthy gut and healthy skin for dogs with food and fat sensitivities with Hill's Prescription Diet ZD Low Fat. Yes, that's all that benefit in one food. Visit your vet to learn more about how it can improve your pet's well-being.
Right, because when I remembered I wanted to get a pet insurance, I realized there's so many exclusions, and it's not like our human one, right? They cover quite a significant amount. The co-share is quite a high percentage, and there's a lot of exclusions. So how useful are pet insurance?
I think it depends a lot on like you mentioned, the coverage and so on. In general, I would advise everyone to study the policies before getting it. But you're right, there are some exclusions, quite a few exclusions. The pet insurance policies, at least most recently, I think I studied 4 or 5 of them. Coverage is not the best. Okay, I don't work with any of them. I mean, as a pet owner, I studied them, and honestly, my own 2 cats are not insured now. But what I do instead is to park aside some money to make sure that I can finance their vet care if needed. It's as if you would do for your own children and your own health as well, for an emergency. But pet insurance as a whole, if it's structured well, and the coverage is good, it's a very reasonable option to pursue. I do feel maybe the market is a bit too small in Singapore. Maybe they need to consolidate or need to work with a partner to get more data. I think they also lack the data to structure a good insurance policy. But if there's some partnership with the industry people, insurance providers, I'm sure we could come up with a good solid insurance program.
Yeah, that would be really beneficial. So another thing regarding this article that you also brought up was regarding the purchasing from an unlicensed breeder.
Yep.
Yeah, so why do you think people are still buying from unlicensed breeder? I mean, I have seen also quite a lot of times people post like, do not buy from unlicensed breeder, either adopt or buy, make sure that it's an ethical breeder and all, but we still keep seeing people purchasing from unlicensed breeder. So what do you think is the key issue here?
I think the first one is, I think people generally, based on my experience, they do know that it is illegal. So they are aware that what they're doing is not right. but perhaps their understanding of the impact that it has or the severity of this, they don't understand it very well. For example, the how serious some behavioral issues can be, because many of these, say, smuggled animals or unlicensed animals are bred in not great conditions. They are anesthetized, say, if they're smuggled in, and all these have a long-term impact on their health, and their behavior as well. And also, what they're fed, while they're being brought up, what diseases that they might carry. Maybe these owners know it's legal, but they actually don't know it's so serious. So I think a big part of it is education, maybe increasing the penalties as well of this. I think that's one thing that these pet owners, it's not just about their individual dogs, but really overall, if you take a step back, they're fueling this unlicensed breeding trade. They're feeding, they're driving the smuggling syndicates, right? And to want to continue to smuggle. So while the individual pet is not great in its individual health, but really it also, the rest of the animals that are being bred, and more animals being kept in captivity and bred in unethical ways, will increase over time because of them fueling the demand of these illegal animals. And I think they need to recognize that. And I do feel that actually some of these pet owners should be held accountable by regulators. I think right now it doesn't come out that strongly. People go after the smugglers, goes after the people that breed these dogs. But I do feel that, people that actually fuel the trade should be held accountable in some way as well. Which to my understanding, they are not at this point. That's why people, like the article you mentioned, it was quite blatant. He said, I bought it from an unlicensed backyard breeder. I don't think any action has been taken against him. I hope it has, but to my understanding, it's not. So it's quite blatant, right? It's quite like, I'm not going to be punished for it. I did buy from a backyard breeder, so what? That kind of mentality. And it sort of trivializes this whole thing, like it's okay. It's good. It makes it seem as if it's a good, I should buy from an ethical breeder, but even if I don't, it's okay. Like the kind of mentality. Yeah. So that's how I think many of these pet owners feel. So I think maybe the penalties need to come down harder. They need to be held accountable. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess with this kind of issues, we also need to understand that it doesn't just affect us, the person who purchases it. More so, it affects the lives of these pets that are bred from our licensed breeder, like you said, smuggling, from other countries over, or the conditions that they are bred in. They are the ones that really suffer at the end of the day.
Yeah, and also add another dimension, right? Like, Singapore, we are free from a lot of diseases, including rabies, but our neighbors are not. The rest of ASEAN is not free from rabies except Brunei, I think. And that's just one disease. And through all these smuggling routes and animals coming in a non-legal manner, there's this introduction of diseases, this risk pathway of introduction of rabies into Singapore is very real. Yeah, there's in northern Malaysia especially, there's a lot of rabies cases out there, and even now in East Malaysia as well, there are more and more rabies cases. So the smuggling from these countries actually is a very real risk of introducing such diseases like rabies into Singapore. And we've been rabies free for 60 years. So if you fuel this trade, actually increases this risk as well. And not just rabies, but other things like if you smuggle birds, bird flu, for example. I know hedgehogs are very popular. They can actually get foot and mouth disease. So yeah, many of these diseases is also a real biosecurity risk for the country. Yeah.
Let's move on to also your next point regarding the neutering of pets, like the preventative care and the pet parents' ultimate decision over their pets. So what can be done when pet parents choose not to take the advice of a veterinarian, or is anything done? So for example, the vet says, okay, you need to, these are the things that need to be done, treatment plan for your pets, for them to recover or at least be better. And the pet parents say, no, I don't want to do it. So is there any control over that, or they just sign a against medical advice form and that's it?
Yeah, I think the first step probably would be to try to understand why, because every case is probably different, but really to understand why the pet owner is not following the instructions. So at least our practice is at Canopy and VetTrust, and for myself personally, we always offer you the gold standard, right? Okay, it having diarrhea, but diarrhea is not a disease. I mean, it's not a specific condition itself. You have to further diagnose what's the underlying cause of diarrhea. You could do blood tests, you could do X-rays, you can do ultrasound. So you can do all these things, but of course the price adds up. So many owners may say, oh, can we try this first? Okay, I'm not going to do all this because I definitely can't afford it. Maybe we do bloods first. And then if it's not better, we try this and that. And then, so one common reason is cost. So if they really, if pet owners really can't afford the full suite of services, then I do hope the vets will understand and try not to judge and find a workaround. Maybe try on medication first, and then only if it's not better in a week, or a few days, and then we do something else again. For non-urgent cases. The other reasons could perhaps be maybe the owner just doesn't want to put the animal through the stress. Because having to take imaging, X-rays and all that, they may, for example, require sedation, it will require restraint. So that's another reason. The third reason could be maybe they just don't trust the vet and they just refuse to listen to vets. In that case, so I think the first step is really to try to understand why the owner is rejecting the treatment plan or diagnostic plan. In general, I think at a certain point when vets feel like, oh, really, if you really don't do anything, it's to the detriment of this animal's health and welfare. Like you mentioned, Mary, they can sign a against medical advice form. Ultimately, in Singapore and many places, animals, including pets, are the property of the owner. And ultimately the property owner has the ultimate say. Of course, animals is slightly different. There must be a minimum standard of the duty of care that's coded in legislation. Yeah. So technically, legally, vets, if they feel that the standard of care has fallen below a certain level that's acceptable, they can actually report to AVS for welfare concerns. Yeah. Say, for example, if someone keeps a dog in a cage all day, never comes out, feeds it rice, just plain rice or something like that, or they suspect physical abuse of the animal, like the wounds when they come in, they can report all these to AVS, and I believe they will take some action there. Yeah. So that's one avenue of recourse. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've touched on all our points for our first part of the podcast today. So we'll see you guys at the next episode. We hope you've learned a lot. We definitely have learned a lot, right, Dylan?
Yeah, maybe I learned a lot.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys in the next episode.